doing well. I'm doing well. Gugu, it's interesting. That script to screen journey really interests me, and I'm wondering if it was different or, similar with season 1. But what's that like getting season 2 scripts and then seeing it come to life on screen, so to speak, for you?
Oh, it's so exciting. I think working with Veronica West, our showrunner, who comes up with these incredible ideas and plot twists and turns. And I think, season 1 really kept you guessing in terms of who to trust. There was a love triangle. Sophie, was going through this internal quest, to figure out, what her life was, having lost her memory. I think this season, Veronica's so passionate about the story. It always starts with a pitch, and then she builds out the story with the other writers, and it's been so exciting to see it come to life. I think especially for me on a personal level, to be able to bring the show home to London with this gorgeous British cast has been really, really meaningful.
Oh, absolutely. Oliver, good to see you. I do find it interesting, right? Because one of my favorite things about season 1 had this, but season 2 really, you're an active detective as an audience member watching the show, right? You're really trying to figure things out. When do you start thinking about the audience from an acting storyteller perspective? Is it when you wrap? Do you start thinking about it in preparation? I'm just curious about that.
Well, I guess it's quite a weird thing, especially if you're an actor. Gugu's an exec producer on the show, and so I feel would have probably a much more interesting answer than I would. But because as an actor, you kind of have to, you kind of have to ignore the fact that anyone's ever going to see it. Otherwise, you would be terrified that you would just never do the job. So you sort of do this thing in a very weird bubble with 100 people watching on set, but you always sort of imagine that they don't care, and so no one's actually going to see it. So it's actually when you see the final product is when you realise how things are being perceived, or how things have been built, or how narratives are sort of being intertwined to kind of affect. But that's, I think, what's so clever about, especially about this season, is that, we said the first season was sort of slow and much more contained and sort of claustrophobic to a certain extent, and this is so massive and wide, and there's sort of the well is so much deeper, that so much can be mined, and all the secrets that come up, and who you trust and who you don't trust, and where that sort of goes. It's an absolute ride.
Millie, before we wrap up, I do want to ask, because, what Gugu and Oliver said had to do with kind of the whodunit component, the mystery component. What's the coolest thing about working on a show like that? That has that kind of whodunit mystery component? Is there something you like the most about working on that kind of thriller, crime, suspense kind of show specifically?
I mean, for season 1, I was only in it for such a short amount of time, but it was during COVID, so we were all out together in Vancouver. I only had a few days filming, so I became sort of a mega fan of the show, where I became dog walker. I would turn up onto set and just watch and be like, this is epic. And I sort of fell in love with the show as sort of an audience member, and then I'd have a couple of days of filming, and then I'd be like, okay, back to being a fan. But then for this season, having, I was so much more involved in the storyline, and that was obviously...
Well, and it's all about you. It's all about your family, isn't it?
Yeah, and how our worlds kind of connect and collide, where for the first season there was so much mystery still for me as well, even though Veronica very kind of thoroughly and carefully has all of these timelines panned out. There's also an element of you want to keep stuff for, you don't want to know where your character's fully going to go. So what was so fun then for the second season was then going from mega fan, still a mega fan, but now being I'm in, and I'm part of this crazy world, and I don't know whether that really answers the question.
It did, absolutely, and I can't wait for people to see season 2 of Surface on Apple TV. Thank you all so much for your time. It was great chatting with you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.